What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Wing and Tail Outdoors. On today's episode, I want to talk to you about my very first shot ever on camera. I'm going to walk you through the things that went well, the things that didn't, and a little bit about the spot where I was at and how it came to be. So without wasting too much time, let's get right into it. First, let's talk a little bit about the area I hunted, why I decided to hunt there, and what it looked like. This was a spot that I've hunted in the past. It's the same area that my personal best came from. I have a pretty good amount of prior knowledge or prior data from this area, and it's an area that has a lot of trails and people going through it, so the deer are used to the human element. So I decided with all of that kind of combined that this was the best place to go if I wanted to get something on camera in New Jersey. First day I went out there, I found some really fresh hot sign. I found 2 fresh scrapes, 2 fresh rubs, all within 20 yards of each other. So I decided to freshen up those scrapes and get up a tree. Didn't have too much action during the hunt, but towards the end of the hunt is where my first mistake happened. I never practiced setting up and breaking down my setup before the season started. So I was in a situation where I needed to clean up and pack down in the dark, and I decided I wasn't comfortable doing that. So I climbed down 15 minutes before dark. Packed up, everything looked good, and as I'm dropping my backpack down the tree, I hear a little rustling. And just off here, about 1 o'clock, tree's right in front of me, 1 o'clock, I have a decent buck right there, and now I'm kind of dead in the water. My camera and everything is down at the bottom, and at this point I don't even care about the footage. I got this buck over here, so I grabbed my bow, and he kind of walked out to my right a little bit. I needed him to go like another 5 yards. I could have had a shot, but I don't know if he caught my scent or what it was, but something made him just pull a 180 and he went off in the other direction. He didn't spook, he didn't run away, he just 180'd and walked away. Next time I got out there, the wind wasn't right for that area, so I hunted a different section of the same woods, had a little bit of action, nothing too exciting. And the third time I got out, I was primed and ready to go back to this location. The wind was blowing in the same direction. I went back to the same general area, freshened up those scrapes, but this time I decided to sit in the direction of where this buck had come from. So now I'm starting to backtrack him as I hunt. At this time, I already decided that I wasn't, quote, trophy hunting. I just wanted to get something on camera that I was proud of. I wanted to get that video experience, and I wanted to get something on the ground. So at about 3:30, when a group of 5 or 6 doe came out at about my 9 o'clock, I was super excited. They slowly and calmly and comfortably worked their way around me. They always stayed about 50-ish, 60 yards away. I was just really excited about getting the footage and working on the filming aspect of all of this coming together. And as I'm filming and as they're feeding, they're working their way around me, and they're getting closer and closer and closer. So now imagine I'm spun around, I'm facing the tree, and these deer are starting to walk behind me, and I'm getting them on camera, and I have the camera to the right side of my tree, and they start to make their way around. And at this time, I had picked a lead doe that I was going to shoot. I aimed the camera in the direction that I thought she was going to go, where my shot was going to be, and at that time I decided I didn't care about the camera anymore. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of the video. As I'm getting myself situated, I go to turn the GoPro on, and I couldn't get it started. And at that time, I decided to forget about it. Again, filming at this time was not my priority. So I started to get set up. Mind you, I'm a lefty, so my shot is going to be off the left side of the tree, and I wanted to shoot this lead doe. It was going to be about a 30-yard shot, something I was very comfortable with. And as I was getting set up, another doe broke off and literally started coming right at my tree. Closer and closer and closer. So I come around on that deer, and at this time, for whatever reason, I had a hard time lining up my sight. And as I'm trying to adjust to get it lined up, she caught that movement. At this time, she's about 10 to 12 yards away. She's full frontal. She's staring right at me. In the moment, I go through the thought of, she's really, really close. My arrow's traveling about 265, 270. There's no way she beats this arrow. I made the decision to shoot. I executed the shot, and the arrow went exactly where I aimed. I watched the deer go off, so I started making those victory calls. About 40 minutes later, I climb out of the tree, I go to look down, and right away I know there's a problem. I don't see good blood. I don't really see blood at all.
Look too good.
And I start going in the direction that she went, and I found a little bit of fatty material on the ground, little specks of blood here or there, and immediately I decided to back out. Grabbed my stuff from the tree, went back to the car, and I decided to play the footage back on the computer. It's at this time that I realized that not only did she duck my arrow at 10 to 12 yards, she also turned on the arrow. And it didn't look like I hit her center anymore. It looked like she had turned and dropped. And it went in behind the neck, in front of the shoulders. And at that time, I still thought, there's no way that I didn't catch lung. There's no way. So I called in a dog at this time. Awesome gentleman comes in, asks me to see the footage. We play it back. And he said, I think that's a dead deer. I think that's worth tracking. I said, I agree. And I took him to the spot that I had hunted. We get to my truck. I walk him into the spot. I tell him where the shot went. And we get to tracking. And man, his dog was awesome. Hopped right on the track. And she tracked that immediately as far as I had gone. And as we're traveling along, we found one pile of blood, maybe about this big. It was bright, it was arterial. At the time, it was something to be excited about because it was our first sign, but at the same time, it wasn't good news. We continued to track this deer for another hour and a half, 2 hours, give or take. She took us through some of the thickest stuff on the property. And when it was all said and done, it ended up being a non-recovery. After tracking for so much time and for so much distance, the tracker looked at me and said, you know, the dog is having a hard time finding that scent. We haven't found anywhere where this deer has wanted to lay down and kind of tend to her wounds. She's not showing any signs of being nervous or injured. And at this time, I think it's safe to say that we're going to call off the track. I knew the gentleman was right. So we backed out, and I was left to deal with that after the fact. Now, when I say I had to deal with that after the fact, what I mean is that in the 20 plus years I have of hunting, I've never hit a deer that I didn't recover. Every deer that I've ever shot at and hit, I recovered. I've missed deer before, clean misses, but I've never hit a deer that I didn't recover. And it didn't sit right with me. It was very hard for me to handle. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it took me like a good month to even get back in a tree. And I thought it over and over and over, what could I do differently? And this is what I came up with. I'm not gonna say that I regret taking a frontal shot. I made that decision in the moment, and I would probably make the same decision again. I don't think a frontal shot is a bad shot. It is a lower percentage shot than a broadside shot, or say a quartering away shot, but there's still a good amount of lethal area for you to hit. Where I think I made my mistake is that I knew she saw me, I knew she was locked onto me, and I didn't give her the credit she deserved. So in the future, I'm not going to take a shot at a deer if I know for a fact they're locked onto me and they know it's coming. Because at that point, I don't know that I'm beating it. So then with all that said and done, I geared up, I transitioned up to New York State, and got going with that season. But to stay on topic and to wrap all this up, let's talk about some of the things that didn't go well, and then we're going to talk about the things that I think did go well. First off, like I mentioned earlier, I definitely should have practiced setting up and breaking down in the dark. Had I done that, I would have been comfortable with it, and I would have sat until dark on that first sit. I'm not saying I would have gotten a shot at that buck, but I definitely would have been more prepared for it. So in the future, practice how you play as you practice, and you'll never have to worry about anything because you'll always be ready. The only other thing, honestly, that I would change is, like I mentioned earlier, knowing that that doe was locked on me, I should not have taken that shot. So in the future, again, doe looking at me or any deer looking at me locked on, I'm not going to take that shot until they make a move, or I need to let down and let that one go. On the flip side of things, I think there were a lot of things that went well in these few sits that I had last year. I had some deer on camera that, you know, basically came around me about, I would say 200, 270 degrees, somewhere in that range, and they didn't win me. So I know at least that my scent control is good enough and my ground control is good enough that when they crossed it, that I didn't have anything to worry about. So that definitely gives me confidence going into the woods. I know I'm not going to fool them all, but being able to fool a few shows me that I'm taking steps in the right direction. The next thing that I think went well is that I went in somewhat blind. Like I said, I had prior data from the area, but I didn't know the area from that year. So I went in, found recent sign, hunted on it, and found success. So moving forward, I want to try to build on that. And maybe next time, instead of settling on that first little bit of sign, maybe I travel a little bit further. And maybe I'm lucky enough to catch that buck a little earlier in the day. This one goes without saying, but I'm very glad that I called the dog in. I'm glad that I didn't try to pursue that track on my own. And I'm just happy that I did everything I feel I could to try to recover the deer that I had hit. So I don't know that I could change anything as far as that's concerned. Lastly, and what I think is probably the most important part of all this, is that I got some really great experience filming. I started to figure out maybe some angles or some things that didn't work out well, and maybe some things that did work. I figured out some ways that may be easier than others to get deer in frame, and I realized some of the shortcomings of the camera that I was using as well. I realized I wasn't able to film through branches, and I wasn't really able to get in focus at a distance. But all of this was great experience that I could use later on. And then when it mattered most, when it was prime time, deer was coming, it was time for the shot, I set the camera up where I thought it needed to be, and I forgot about it. Because if I'm going to shoot at an animal, I'm going to make sure that I'm giving it all of my focus and all of my attention. So when it came down to it, I'm happy that I handled that the way I did. Overall, it's unfortunate that it was a non-recovery, but I think a lot of good can come out of it and a lot of change for the future to maybe avoid some of those things happening again. Every experience is a learning experience, and I tell my students all the time, the only mistakes you can make in life is not learning from your mistakes. And that pretty much gonna wrap up my 2023 New Jersey hunting season. I want to thank y'all again for joining me on another episode of Wing and Tail Outdoors, where success is always just a commitment away. On our next episode, we're going to be talking about one of maybe just a few things. Some of the ideas I have stirring around, or talking to you about how the no-till process is going for us right now, what it looks like, what's gone well, what hasn't. I want to talk to you about the New York hunting season last year that's following up my New Jersey season from last year. And lastly, I've been stirring around about talking over the differences and the pros and cons of the scientific arrow build versus the regular arrow build. As always, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Wing and Tail Outdoors, where success is always just a commitment away. If you like what you saw today, drop a like below, subscribe to the channel, and drop us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything that you'd like to hear us talk about. Until next time, have a great day.